Hello YouTube, it's Englentine here, and I've got a video that somebody sent in to me after they saw my feminist SJW misconception video. I appreciate this, and if you find a video like this that you would like me to rip into, by all means please leave a link in the messages or in the comment section of this video here. But without further ado, let's hear what these force-fed nerds have to say about SJWs in comics.
Welcome back to Sourcefed Nerd. I'm Whitney Moore, and as a bona fide comic book fan, I get a little heated when I see people make broad assumptions over misunderstandings of the genre.
Wow, I didn't think I would have to stop it so soon. Now, I don't know who this person is. I don't know if she's a true comic fan or not, but what I can tell is she's reading everything off of a card, off of cue cards, maybe a monitor, I don't know, but she's reading it. She's not saying it. That being said, that means somebody wrote down, read, and approved her use of the word genre, which is, I think she's trying to say medium, like superhero comics are a genre of the medium of comic books. Anyway, that could just be a nitpick, so.
It's like, it's only for kids, or it's not legitimate art, but most recently, comics have been ruined by those pesky meddling SJWs.
I think we're more pissed off at the writers trying to appease the SJWs, but don't tell her.
For those of you who don't know, a social justice warrior is a term jerks like to use on the internet in order to silence conversations about equality.
I always figured SJW was just a short way of saying social justice warrior, and the jerks who are complaining about the social justice warriors are actually complaining about social justice warriors trying to force their beliefs on other people's, such as trying to get people to accept a new definition of a pronoun that's been around for hundreds of years.
Yeah, we can admit here that sometimes you take one too many hits of Tumblr and privilege becomes the only thing you talk about, and that's obnoxious.
Yes, trying to recuse yourself from some sort of wrongdoing because of an ill-perceived privilege of a person based on something they had no control over, that's pretty obnoxious. We agree on that.
You can't Google the words SJW and comics without a whole bunch of articles popping up about how Marvel sales are down because they're being too progressive, or how SJW culture is ruining comic books for its fans. You know what I say to that? Whoever wrote these articles don't know dick about comics.
Holy crap, did this little girl just step into a whole bunch of stupid. Now let me address the personal thing first. The whole thing about somebody who makes an anti-SJW in comics video doesn't know anything about comics. I've been collecting comics for 40 years, and I could talk about a whole bunch of stuff that she brings up without having to look in a history book or Wikipedia to tell you about it. I was there, I lived through it the first time we picked up the comics, the first time they were on the shelf. We know a few things. Also, she mentions that we don't know dick because we say that Marvel sales are down because of the SJWs. Once again, it's not because of the SJWs, it's because the writers not only want to push their agenda, but they want to insult people who don't agree with it. I have stated in my last video about SJWs that the comic book, the Geek Society, is the most accepting group of all time. You come to the conventions, we take you, we accept you. It has always been like that. We have always been the outcasts, the geeks. We have always been that. So we do not shun people based on superficial things. And to the idiot SJWs, yes, race is a superficial thing you have nothing to do with.
Because comics have literally always been about social justice. Look at this picture, see?
No, comics are all about incest. Look at this picture. Or this panel about Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Or this one where Ms. Marvel falls in love with her own child. Actually, I don't know. Maybe I have a point about this whole incest thing. Here we go. I know what we can do to end this whole SJW feminist thing in comic books. Comics have always been about female empowerment. Look at this picture. Point being, one picture does not make the entire story, no matter how much you try to cherry pick it.
So now I'm gonna take you cucks through comic book history, so the next time somebody complains about how all of a sudden SJWs have ruined comics, you can well actually them straight back to their shitty little forums on 4chan. Ready?
Oh, cucks. With a U. I got it. Okay, continue.
Let's start at the very beginning, and to do that we need to go all the way back to the 1930s. Hey there, Sprouts, how you growing? It's the 1930s and we're deep in the worst depression to ever hit the good old US of A.
So this was an artistic choice.
Unemployment is sitting at a record high, and so we're looking for a little escapism and a lot of heroism. Comic books are the cat's pajamas, the bee's knees. 1930s were also embroiled in some pretty heavy social injustice. In 1934, two Jewish immigrants by the names of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster created a character who represented everything the downtrodden working class of the 1930s dreamed of. Of course, I'm talking about Superman, and he too was an immigrant with a rural upbringing, only he had the infinite power to stop anything that stood in the path of truth, justice, and the American way.
Remember when she said people like me don't know dick? I'm gonna show her that I know a lot of dick, or something. Now, I don't know if you caught it or not, but in that last clip, she actually called Superman an immigrant. Now, I don't know if refugee would be a proper word because of his planet dying, but let's talk about this for a second. There are some facts here, but without the context, it kind of makes them into half-truths. And this context would actually allow people back in the day, back in 1938 when Superman was created, to accept his origin that much more than we would be able to today. Such as the fact that if he's 30 years old now, then in 1987, somebody would have seen his pod coming to Earth other than just the two people who would have found him by themselves, and it wouldn't be out of the norm for two people to find them only by themselves in the middle of the Dust Bowl. Today, the government would have been all over that Kansas City farm. Add to that the fact that the immigration law was a lot more laxed back then, and the conditions of the economy makes Superman's origins a lot easier to swallow the way they were written back then. Modern day writers, however, do not enjoy the same environment legally when it comes to adopting a baby out of nowhere. And this had caused a need for a retcon, which means that Jor-El placed Kal-El into a birthing matrix, so when he arrives on Earth in Kansas City, he becomes a natural-born citizen of the United States, not an immigrant. The whole adoption thing, however, would take some forgeries in order to show that Clark Kent was in fact the child of John and Martha Kent.
In fact, Superman's first appearance was in a comic called Superman, Champion of the Oppressed.
Ignoring the fact that Superman's first story was in a comic book called Action Comics #1, the story he debuted in is just simply called Superman. However, I'll give her a half-truth because the bottom left panel has a picture of Superman and the words, Superman, Champion of the Oppressed, the physical marvel who had sworn to devote his existence to helping those in need. Does that make him a social justice warrior? No. However, he did break up some strikes and he did attack slumlords at some points. However, I'm not quite sure I would count that as social justice.
So that was at the very beginning of comic book history, but let's see if that sort of social justice heroism keeps consistent throughout the years. Spoiler warning, it does.
Here's where she's going to reveal her disconnect with comic book readers. Now, she's going to list off a few things that actually did happen, and she's going to list them as social justice issues. However, she's missing the point. We don't care if comic book writers tackle these social issues. We never have. It's when they push their own agendas and their politics down our throats, or insult those who happen to disagree with them.
And since the topic of whether it's okay or not to punch a Nazi is especially relevant these days, I'm gonna go ahead and say yes, it's totally okay to punch a Nazi. Check it out. If Wonder Woman can do it, so can you.
Okay, don't punch people. Alright, there's absolutely no middle ground to this. Unless somebody is trying to physically hurt you, do not hit them. It is wrong. Understand? Wrong. Nazis were well defined back during World War II. Now, people are calling someone a Nazi because they disagree with them. Do not hit someone because they disagree with you. I can't believe this site has advocated this kind of violence. Sourcefed, you really need to rethink your policies.
Anyways, Captain America himself was the first superhero to don an American flag, and
or the Shield appeared 1 year before Captain America, but what do I know? I'm an anti-SJW jerk that doesn't know dick about comics.
After comic books first blew up, it was decided that there couldn't be such a massive industry of entertainment without having some sort of regulation. The Comics Code Authority was the solution to this as a sort of code of ethics for publishers and seal of approval for parents.
What the literal hell is she talking about? Except for the fact that the Comics Code existed, there is just barely anything in that sentence that was truth. The Comics Code Authority wasn't created because the comic industry got big. It was created because there was a doctor named Frederick Wortham who wrote a book suggesting that comic books cause delinquency, and people fucking bought it. Neither is this any kind of government oversight. This is comic book creators governing themselves so they didn't have to adhere to government regulations.
These squeaky clean rules explicitly stated that there should not be any sort of content that would encourage dissent towards the police, government officials, and so on.
Well, that's kind of an oversimplification. Here are some of the rules. Also, is she trying to put social justice warriors as some sort of bastions of freedom? They literally rage for the machine. Well, not now because Trump is there, but good Lord, they are so anti-freedom, it's amazing.
In fact, in the 1970s, the Department of Health approached Stan Lee to create a comic that would talk about drug addiction, so he wrote it into a Spider-Man story. Marvel had to bypass the comics code in order to publish it, but the comic was such a success that other publishers also took the hint and started talking about social issues without the code's consent.
And this is where I was talking about she starts to name every issue as a social justice issue.
With the code no longer relevant in the 80s, DC and Marvel were free to make their characters more flawed in order to confront societal issues. Child abuse was revealed to be the reason behind Hulk's rage, Lex Luthor went from being an evil inventor to a corrupted businessman, and Iron Man was revealed to be an alcoholic.
You see, not all issues are social justice issues. And the things that she was talking about, all great stories by the way, go check them out, were done in a way that the story was told and we made up our minds as to what we thought about what was happening. Shit like this not only says, hey, I see a problem, it says if you don't agree with the problem, you are a bad person.
Let's take a minute to talk about race relations in comics because representation here has historically been far from perfect. From characters of color being downright offensive to an overall lack of heroes that aren't white, it's legitimate to look back and wish these publishers were more forward-thinking.
I don't know if she's blaming the right kind of people. I don't think this is a publisher problem. There have been a lot of black heroes over the years. Some Latino, but you know who's really underrepresented? Asians. I mean, we have new Superman, but come on, there's just not a lot of Asian heroes. However, I don't put that at the feet of the publishers. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to blame the readers. I'm going to have to blame us. Black Panther there, he doesn't last long every time he has a book. And let's face it, if there was a comic book in the 1930s when Superman came out called Big Black Guy Beats Up Whitey, and it outsold Superman and outsold Batman, then to this day we would be watching Big Black Guy Beats Up Whitey movies while wearing Big Black Guy Beats Up Whitey underoos. Because what liberals and SJWs casually forget is they're calling corporations evil and racist, is that they're also evil and greedy. As a matter of fact, they're only evil and greedy, and the only color they really care about isn't black, isn't brown, isn't yellow, it's green. And if it makes them money, they continue to do it until it does.
Let's jump to current comics because a lot of interesting stuff is happening here right now. A lot of fanboys and girls have been pretty pissed off about the newer, more progressive iterations of their favorite classic characters. Thor is a girl now, Iron Man is also a girl, but she's a black teen McCannon!
The fact that she's saying this makes me think that she nor the people who wrote the words that she's saying have actually paid attention to any of the objections to the female Thor. Nobody cares. It's that she's not Thor, she's Jane Foster. Other people have held the hammer of Thor. They didn't take his name. Here, just to make my point, which one of these two characters are Thor? Answer, neither of them. That's Superman, that's Wonder Woman, they're holding the hammer of Thor. Thor is who he is, not what he is. It would be the same as if Sam Wilson took over the role of Steve Rogers and not Captain America. So it has nothing to do with McCannon, but it has something to do with very bad writing. As for Riri Williams, I honestly think she's a victim of her time. I think the people were so fed up with all the stupid SJW bullshit that they attacked a character who was nothing more than just a new character. Personally, I would not be surprised if this kind of change came from on high because Robert Downey Jr. is getting very, very expensive in the movies, and if they could continue to have Iron Man but have a cheaper actor or actress, then they're going to do it. But calling us racist because we don't like it? We've been down this road before and didn't give a shit, you condescending little millennial asshat. I'm actually beginning to get pissed off at this regressive racist. I seriously am.
If you're still watching, I assume you didn't come here to have your mind changed, but instead are a true comic book fan who knows your history. But hey, now you can have me backing you up the next time somebody says SJWs are ruining comic books.
Neither she nor her writers know much about comic books. However, I can honestly give her this much credit. She said nothing of substance on this issue.
Because really, guys, a hero is somebody who defends the rights and the safety of the people. Why wouldn't superheroes be SJWs?
It's because for a long time, until we got this new batch of writers and such, heroes saw the people that they saved as individuals. And they saw themselves that way also. Batman and Superman fight crime, but they don't do it in the same way because they are individuals. Social justice is always about a group. And let's face it, if a black person does not follow the same rules as what the social justice warriors want, even if that black guy comes from the ghetto and raises himself up to be one of the most prominent black men in America, they say he's not a real black guy, even though he literally lived the struggle. And we watched it happen with this gay guy, well, he's practicing Catholic but born Jew, immigrant. They threw to the wolves because he didn't say what they wanted him to say.
Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to Sourcefed Nerd, and I will see you next time.
Wow, if this is the kind of crap that they produce, I may have to start subscribing to them just so I can make more reaction videos off of them. Now, I did edit this for time, but I tried to make sure that I got all of the points. I'm going to leave the link to the full video in the description below so you can see that. So tell me, where am I right, where am I wrong? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you like this video, you want to see more, just click like, share, subscribe, and notifications to see more. But most importantly, thank you very much for watching.